Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts.
Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We've got Trump's speech covered from all angles, the State of the Union last night. And folks, the more things change, the more they stay the same. This reminded me of classic vintage Trump speech. But let's break down and let's talk about what really happened last night. Now, you're going to hear political commentators, particularly on the left, who are going to pan the speech. They're going to say, well, what about affordability? And what about this? And what about that? But when you think about it, what Donald Trump did in that speech last night effectively was reset the world order on what the United States is doing. Okay? If you were a Trump fan moving into the speech, you're likely still a Trump supporter. If you had a negative opinion on Trump going into the speech, you probably still have a negative opinion. Typically, State of the Union speeches don't move the needle one way or the other. Now, the independent's the key voting bloc that counts. So I don't know that it really moved a lot of people last night, but it clearly set a defining order on what this country was going to be. You know, let's think about the key pillars of what Trump talked about last night. The economy, he said, was strong. Now, there may be some pockets where it's not. But overall, when you have an economy that grew at 2.2% last year, is likely going to grow somewhere between 3 to 4% this year, unemployment is ticking downward. It's between 4.2 and 4.3% right now. Inflation is ticking down. It's running about 2.4%. That's down from 3% when Biden was president. And inflation peaked at 9% under Biden. So that's where all this inflation came from. So Trump correctly blamed the Democrats, for high cost. However, he's been in office a year. That play is not going to work anymore. So he's going to have to make some changes there. You can't just keep blaming Democrats. Now, the tariffs, obviously, he was dealt a blow by the Supreme Court. He reinstated 10% tariffs. That's going to continue. So when you look at the overall framework, okay, and this is the really thing, how did Trump define America last night? Well, he talked extensively about being energy independent. The big thing right now is people are worried about their electricity bills, all the AI data centers taking up power. Trump made it crystal clear last night. For these hyperscalers who are building these AI data centers, create your own power. Don't take it from the power that's going to the American public. But again, energy independence will solve that problem. Trump made it crystal clear that the U.S. is going to be on a path of energy independence. And right now, we are the largest energy producer in the world. Secondly, he talked about American industrial production last night. That was a key pillar. It always amazes me. Every time Trump is talking about energy, industrial production, the rejection of globalization, and that America is now, in the lead, Democrats just sit on their hands. I mean, think about it last night, how many times the Republicans got up and clapped, and Democrats just sat there, even when there was clearly good news at hand. So when you look at the pillars of his speech last night about how he defined America, yes, he acknowledged we have some issues. Yes, certain pockets of the economy, affordability is an issue, but that's from persistent higher prices. I don't think people thought when Trump became president, prices were going to come down. Now they have on certain things. Gasoline prices are down. Now, did Trump tell a couple whoppers last night about prices around the country? Yeah, he stretched it a little bit. Okay, but that's just Trump being Trump. We already know that. But when I look at how people viewed that speech last night, and I'm not talking about the higher ups, the historians, historians gave him pretty good remarks on that. Legacy media, predictably negative. Conservative media, predictably positive. There's a little bit of everything in there last night. There was patriotism with the U.S. hockey team, the men's hockey team. That was outstanding. Trump had mixed things in there about victims of crime. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. But when you look at it aggregately, what was Trump trying to accomplish last night? Well, obviously, he wants to move the needle on the approval rating so that more Republicans will be in Congress. Yes, to be determined if that goal was achieved. But the main thing he laid out last night that I heard was border security. No one can question that he secured the border, and he's got high marks for that. And he basically did what he said he was going to do. Energy independence, repeated throughout the speech so many times. As he often jokes, we have more clean coal in this country, hundreds of years supply. So even made reference to the fact we're getting oil out of Venezuela last night. Okay, so energy independence, a secure border, strengthening the industrial production. No longer is America the whipping boy of the world and being taken advantage of. A complete rejection of globalization, and that the overriding point was America is back leading the world. And I don't think there's any question about that. You look at the other powers around the globe. Russia's bogged down. It's 4 years into its war with Ukraine, losing 35,000 soldiers a month. They have no regard for life in Russia, folks. Don't ever think they do. The Russians have now lost more soldiers in this Ukraine war than the United States lost in all of World War II. Think about that. So, again, so many good things in the speech last night. Now, let's talk a little bit we talked about the economics a little bit. The reaction post-speech is good. The stock markets have been trading up. They're within 2% of their all-time highs, which is great. But again, think about the context of what he was trying to accomplish, and then let's talk about some reality numbers here. Trump's approval rating varies. Now, if you listen to the legacy media, he's sitting between 40 and 45%. Polls we respect, Insider Advantage and Rasmussen, having 46, 47%. That is a gigantic C difference there, folks. If you're sitting there, CNN having 38, that's ridiculous. But if you're sitting there in the low 40s versus the mid 40s, that's a big gap. So polling outfits we respect, Rasmussen and Insider Advantage, that called the 2024 election, they've got Trump 46, 47%. But he's upside down. Think about this. By double digits on immigration, not the border, but the pictures are still in people's mind about what happened in ICE in Minneapolis. The economy, again, I gave you good economic numbers, but again, if you're in that, again, we've talked about the K-shaped economy. If you're in the upper half of that K, you're doing fine. If you're in the lower half, you're not. More people in the lower half than the upper half. He also, on tariffs, folks, I hate to tell you this, but the American public's not buying what he's selling on the tariffs, because there's a belief that by many Americans that that's part of their pain because of these tariffs. Now, you could make the argument the other side, but different studies have come out anywhere from 80 to 90% of those tariffs were paid by the Americans. And a lot of companies paid them. Some passed on their costs, some did not. And then inflation. Okay, inflation's at 2.4%. And Trump correctly blamed the Biden administration. It hit 9 under Biden from all that COVID spending they did. They spent so much money. That's what drove it up. Now, when Trump took office in January of 2025, inflation was just a tick over 3%. It's now down to 2.4. Folks, that last percentage is tough. The Fed's goal is 2. So it's tough getting there. So you're asking yourself, Mark, what's going on here? Why is he upside down on these numbers when so many things are going well? Well, that's the paradox we have to get to here. Before you get really nervous about those numbers, think about this. Republicans as a party, 13% underwater. That's about where Trump is right now. Democrats as a party, 20 points underwater. So this, in my mind, is a classic case of nobody's happy about anything. Now, why some of these poll outfits are the way they are, Democrats don't forget. It doesn't matter who the opponent is to them. The 2026 midterms are going to be, Trump's name is not on the ballot, but they're going to be about Trump. It could be John Doe as the Republican candidate, and he could be the second coming, but it doesn't matter. If he's got an R by his name is Trump, and they are going to pound that over and over and over to try to make this a referendum on the president. That's why it's so important. It's the policies that is put in place here, where bring down energy prices, bring down food prices, bring down drug prices. He's got time for this stuff to kick in before voters vote. And he tried to build the pillars of it last night. So overall, I give the president pretty high grades for last night. I'm not going to call it A+, and I'm not going to call it, a B+, but it was somewhere around an A. I give him good marks for it because he hit the key points he had to hit last night. Now, was it the longest speech ever? Yeah, by a little bit. It was a little bit longer than the last one he did. So yes, he has achieved the goal of the longest State of the Union speech. The Democratic rebuttal, again, the legacy media praised Governor Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. I didn't hear any substance in that whatsoever that would turn the needle. So, when I look at aggregately, do I think last night's speech is going to turn a lot of heads? Probably not. Historically, they don't. However, the tone last night made it crystal clear where America's going, and we'll see how these policies play themselves out. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Does it bother you as much as it bothers me when I see Trump touting things really good for America and Democrats just sit on their hands? I get it if you don't want to collapse if you have a policy differential. Okay, that's happened for decades. But when Trump starts touting good things that are happening, and how about that classic line last night? And you knew what was coming. Where Democrats have been sitting on their hands most of the night, other than cheering the hockey team. I mean, even when Trump talked about crime being committed and the steps the administration has taken to combat that, they just sat on their hands. So I thought it was interesting when Trump did and this is classic Trump back from the Apprentice days. All right, we're going to stand up here if you believe the following, and you knew it was coming. How many of you believe it's the job of the federal government to keep American citizens safe versus illegal aliens? Well, you knew that every Republican was going to stand up. And what was shocking was none of the Democrats did. Now, I heard Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, explain it. Well, we don't agree with how he's protecting Americans, so we can't stand up for that. That's baloney, folks. The Democratic Party is the party of illegal aliens. They didn't want to offend the illegal aliens, and that's why they didn't stand up. But it's just mind-boggling to me that all the opportunities during that speech that they had to stand up for America, they didn't do it. Now, again, does it really surprise you? You know what was on full display last night? Trump derangement syndrome at the maximum. I mean, it would not have mattered if the economy was growing 4%. Inflation was at 1%. I mean, these people loathe Trump so much. The Trump derangement syndrome is real. All right, we're going to take a 30-second break, but when we come back, we're going to get into a little more of the nuance from last night and some interesting observations. See you in 30 seconds.
AI is everywhere, but none of it does everything. Until now, meet Real Intelligence, RI, the one AI that does it all better. It generates cinema-quality 4K videos, unreal images, and award-worthy music, all in one platform. RI even writes code and handles advanced research at your command. No more juggling multiple apps or settling for less. Your creativity deserves one powerhouse. Real Intelligence, better at everything, all in one place. Try RI now for free at tryrinow.com.
And we're back. Okay, I want to go back to the first part of his speech. And, as predictable as the sun rising and the sun setting, Representative Green, I believe he's from the Houston suburbs, Texas, was ejected for the second year in a row. Now, look, he was carrying a sign that was appropriate. He was really ticked off about that comment that some Trump or some staffer posted about Obama a couple weeks back. But again, State of the Union, okay, have your sign, but don't insult the president at that point. I sort of I said to myself, I wonder if Green's going to get thrown out again. Sure enough, two speeches in a row, 2 different years, he was ejected from the House. Now, look, he's not alone. 70 Democrats, folks, elected not to attend. Now, they have the right to do that. Of course, they don't have to attend, but I think from what I was seeing, I never could find them anywhere. They were having their own State of the People's Union, whatever the hell that is, somewhere at the other end of the Washington Mall. They got no coverage whatsoever, nor did they deserve any. State of the Union back in the old days, or even the most recent days, you showed up. Even at Trump's first term, they showed up. That just goes to show you, folks, how deranged some of these Democrats are. I mean, it is Trump derangement syndrome on steroids. All right. We talked about illegal immigration. Let's talk a little bit about voting rights. The SAVE Act. Folks, it's got 80% approval. Now, Republicans have talked about forcing a vote on that using a standing filibuster. We talked about that previous shows. I'm not going to get into that today. But again, that got brought up last night. Again, Republicans standing ovation, sticking with 80% of voters. Democrats sitting on their hands. I saw Chuck Schumer interviewed afterward. He said, well, the question was asked by a legacy media commentator. Well, why do you against something that 80% of Americans support? His answer was somewhat troubling. He goes, well, under the SAVE Act, we're going to have all these people cleansed off the voter rolls. Well, okay. If that's the case, then we need to clean them up. Schumer's worried that they're not going to be able to, quote, be re-registered. That's why the Democratic Party is so against this bill. Again, they don't care what 80% of the public wants. Folks, this bill gets 75% of Democrats wanting voter ID. But Democrats are worried that all the fake voters that are sitting on these rolls are going to get cleansed. We've already seen it happening, redistricting. Democrats are losing seats across the country. Population trends, demographic movements. Now, I don't know if that's going to help Republicans in the 2026 midterms. Right now, it looks shaky. But the point is, Democrats will do anything in their power not to pass this. So if Republicans have to go to a standing filibuster, they need to do it because this needs to get signed into law. It will get rid of all those dead people, all the double registrations, all the potential fraud that exists. If you have potential fraud in your voting, clean it up. 80% of the people are sticking with the administration, and they want to see the SAVE Act passed. Now, Green wasn't the only star there last night. Ilhan Omar of Somali fame, Minnesota fraud fame, her and her sidekick, Rashida Palestine Tlaib, they were right sitting next together. They were trying to yell and shout at Trump. He would have none of it. He just walked right over him. But again, at least they were there. Okay. But this State of the Union stuff, okay, is turned in when Trump's on the stage speaking. It's just a bitterly partisan thing. And, Omar and Tlaib, shouting, supporting the Palestinians, supporting the Somalis. Look, the FBI is still investigating all that massive billions in fraud that the Somalis did in Minneapolis. To be determined. We haven't seen that yet. Throughout the speech, Trump also touted the work of Immigration Customs Enforcement. And folks, they are not backing down. Yeah, they may have left Minneapolis, but the detention centers are still being built around the country, the deportation centers. Mass deportation is going to continue. And if you think about it, look at the crime statistics. Murder rates are at their lowest level in 100 years. Crime is down across the country. Fentanyl, we just saw what happened in Mexico. Fentanyl use is down 50%. So what ICE is doing is working. Now, politically, they've got an issue because it's no coincidence, folks, that Trump's numbers started to fall when all those pictures came out of Minneapolis. Trump campaigned on mass deportations and getting rid of the bad guys. And again, they've corrected some errors that took place there. But it's so interesting. All the Democrats can talk about is, 2 people being killed in ICE operations, and then the quote, the Epstein, files and the survivor, that's all they talk about. Why? Because that's negative towards Trump. So when Trump is sitting here touting the accomplishments, where millions have left the country, either been deported, it's around 700,000 deported so far, or voluntarily left, he's got a success. And when he talks about other things, he says, hey, we've sealed the border. People are not crossing. People are self-deporting. ICE is doing its job. Inflation's coming down. Inflation is low, not where unemployment's low. So, things are happening here that Trump talked about. Let's talk about the other thing that had big time news out of our southern quote neighbor last week. The cartel, El Mencho, gets killed. 30 soldiers also lost their life. Total death tolls around 75 people from that operation, many of them cartel members. But it just goes to show you the ruthlessness that Trump has to deal with. Fortunately, the cooperation was great between the intelligence of the U.S. government and the Mexican police force and army. But it was deemed unsafe in Mexico after that. So again, many cartel members, I saw one statistic, up to 100 leading cartel members have been arrested, taken to jail. But it's like whack-a-mole. One goes to jail, another one pops up. So again, what Trump is dealing with here, think about the successes we talked about. Fentanyl use way down, crime way down, all these accomplishments. But despite all that, Democrats, boy, they are seething. And as we've talked about many times, Trump is trying to move the needle here. And if he continues to focus on the economy, talks about the good things that he's doing, then he has a chance for that message to resonate. Now, let's talk a little bit. I've got one disgusting thing. It really bugged me last night. When the Ukrainian woman was killed by that psychopath on the bus in North Carolina, and her mother was there last night, and all the Republicans stood, cheered, were respectful. Democrats sat on their hands. Here was a thug, a mentally deranged guy, had been arrested 12 times in North Carolina. I don't know why he was not in jail. And Trump calls out for support for the woman's mother, and they don't even acknowledge it. Why? Because they're the party of crime, and they're a party of illegal immigrants. Now, this guy was not an illegal immigrant. He was born in North Carolina. But still, he was a criminal, should have been in jail, out 12 times. And yet they were not even supportive of that. And you saw that throughout the speech. There were many victims in there. Erica Kirk, she didn't get exactly the warmest reception from Democrats, and well, that doesn't shock you. But again, throughout the theme of all this, Trump is talking about accomplishments. You see Republicans standing up, cheering. Now, some of it was a little aggressive, I'll admit. But the Democrats, they were like, logs just sitting there. Now, Trump briefly talked about the Iranian situation. Talks are continuing this week. Folks, 65% of Americans are expecting a strike. That could happen, okay? And you've heard legacy media and even conservative media talk about The Iranians have been buying missiles from China. This isn't going to be a cakewalk if it happens. So you've got the Iranians resisting their own government, that theocratic group that's been in there for damn near 50 years, 47, 48 years, and just a horrific situation in Iran. Trump has made it clear, and he made it clear last night, there will be no nuclear weapon with the Iranians. So, talks continue this week. We're going to follow that one closely. Russia-Ukraine situation didn't get a whole lot of mention last night. That war's been going on 4 years, and as we mentioned earlier, folks, Russia's losing 35,000 soldiers a month. They couldn't care less. It's a war of attrition, and they're trying to continue with the pressure campaign. The Europeans are supporting the Ukrainians. The U.S. is supporting the Ukrainians. Heck, the biggest thing was when Elon Musk pulled down Starlink. It turned into a drone war, and drones are killing a lot of people over there. So here again, we have a situation where Trump, in no uncertain terms, said if he had been president when he lost the election, this would not have happened. I think he's right. Well, we're never going to know that, but he's gone out of his way numerous times to make that point. And one other thing he brought up last night, we have a partial government shutdown right now, and members of the TSA, Transportation Safety Authority, they do everything from the Coast Guard, airport security, FEMA. Well, look at what just happened. We had effectively a FEMA disaster with that massive, massive snow dump in the Northeast. Mayor Mondami had to ask people to sign up to volunteer to shovel snow. Why? FEMA couldn't do it. They're not getting, there's no money there for it. Lines at TSA, they're not paying them. What do you expect? And here again, this is Democrats trying to force changes to immigration customs enforcement policy by defunding TSA. The irony is ICE is funded for 3 years. They got no issues at ICE. So what do the Democrats do? They're trying to inflict pain on the rest of the American public. Really? The Coast Guard, FEMA, airport security? Don't you want airport security, folks, when you travel? Don't you want the Coast Guard out there? Right now, with 2 feet of snow in parts of the Northeast, we sure could use FEMA's help. Hopefully, that issue gets resolved, but you don't even recognize it. I mean, Trump talked about it last night, but we're in the midst of a partial government shutdown because Democrats, once again, are using this as leverage to try to force changes to ICE. It's not a very good bargaining position, but they're doing what they can do. So let me again summarize the context of the speech last night. Trump talked extensively about energy, border security. Countries have to have borders or you don't have a country. Most people agree. The industrial production in this country should be picking up this year. So his chance right now at midterm success hinges on America continues to lead, industrial production grows, keep the border secure, energy prices being stable, and ultimately inflation coming down. And if the president can accomplish those things, they have a fighting chance. They got a razor-thin margin in the House, folks. No, I don't want to sugarcoat this to you, but the average loss during a midterm of the president's party is around 22 seats. The odds highly favor the Democrats taking over control of Congress, but basically Trump's message is you can't trust him, and you really can't. Boy, I tell you one thing. He took every opportunity last night to lambaste the Democrats, and rightfully so. I will give people like Hakeem Jeffries credit. He sat there, listened to it, was respectful. So many Democrats were not. But keep an eye on it, folks, because as situations change quickly. All right, that's Schaftlein Report for the day. We gave you the analysis. Be back in a couple days. We have the news covered for you. Patriot.tv. Stick with real intelligence. See you on Friday.
Sadie, why don't more people know about the health benefits of Glucodown soluble fiber? That it lowers blood sugar, especially after meals?
Gluco-Down drink mixes are enriched with soluble fiber for healthy blood sugar. It's diabetic-friendly nutrition, and it's clinically proven.
Gluco-Down's clinically proven soluble fiber helps maintain blood sugar in a healthy range, especially after meals.
Gluco-Down is a game changer.
Keep your blood sugar healthy. Try all 8 flavors of Gluco-Down.
Available at Amazon or in the diabetic care aisle at your local pharmacy.